Okay, let's bring the Metro North meeting for the month of September to order, please. Any public comments? Yes, we do. First public speaker is George Akalis from the Institute for Rational Urban Mobility. I'm going to speak on the Long Island Railroad East Side Access.
Good morning. My name is George Akalis. I'm the president of the Institute for Rational Urban Mobility. IRM is a New York City-based not-for-profit corporation concerned with reducing traffic congestion in dense urban places. IRM has long supported making better use of the region's commuter rail lines by remaking them into a single regional rail system with frequent service, integrated fares, and through running at Penn Station. IRM also supports plans to facilitate access from points west of the Hudson and from Long Island to Manhattan's East Side, the nation's largest concentration of office activity. I've attached the statement I read at last July's committee meeting because I have yet to receive a response to the grave concerns expressed by 4 well-recognized fire safety experts about the ability of some 8,000 Long Island Railroad passengers to escape from MTA's Deep Cavern Terminal Station, 150 feet below Park Avenue, in a timely way. With acts of terrorism against U.S. facilities occurring around the world, these concerns should not be dismissed lightly. Even without these concerns, it would be wise for MTA to conduct an independent review of this project, MTA's largest. The Deep Cavern Station adds 3 to 4 minutes of extra travel time in each direction when compared to the upper-level alternative studied in detail by Delcan Corporation, Canada's largest engineering firm. This is nearly a quarter of the benefits expected from the project. A relatively simple connection to existing tracks and platforms at Grand Central could be completed in a timely manner. Operating costs would be substantially lower as well. A further refinement in Queens would be to eliminate the costly midday storage yard and extra approach tracks at Sunnyside. Furthermore, MTA should review its plan to seek a $3 billion Federal Railroad rehabilitation loan for this costly, passenger-unfriendly project. Hopefully the administration and Congress will welcome a close look at alternatives that would provide better service at lower cost and far fewer risks to passengers. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Murray Bowden.
Good morning. Welcome to the next century. When you weren't looking last night, the world changed. This is not the same world we had 3 months ago. Howard and I have established a working relationship. I was standing next to Kevin a week ago Wednesday when you were talking to him and he wouldn't say I said hello. I've established a working relationship with Chris Ward at the Port Authority. I now support a replacement for the Tappan Zee Bridge, reconfigured. The way we do business is changed radically, and maybe some of you haven't noticed it yet. At the Port Authority, when I make a request to meet with someone, it's immediately taken care of. That hasn't happened here yet. It's about to change. Somebody's going to have to say, when Murray Bowden requests a meeting with any agency, it gets arranged. I've made arrangements with 3 universities, one in Amherst, one in Long Island City, and one in Manhattan, to meet with their transportation people to discuss different ways of doing rail service and transportation in this area. To find students to help redesign rail cars, because they haven't been redesigned in 150 years. What will be the base measurement of this whole situation is the inability of various bus companies to demand that the speed on the buses be indicated as a number digitally. Now that can't be disputed. The analog display of speed on a bus just doesn't work anymore. And that will become the basis of all of the change that we need to make. If you can't deal with that, then please retire. I don't carry an iPad anymore. Like my granddaughter, I'm walking around with a smartphone. Virtually everything I do is here except what's there. The legislature in the Netherlands no longer issues paper. Yes, I'll cut it as quickly as I can. The legislature in the Netherlands no longer has any paperwork. Everybody has an iPad. If you can't begin to work using an iPad or a tablet, it may be time for you to look for retirement. This issue of change is so encompassing that I take an extra moment to make you aware the world has changed. Howard is moving forward on that reconstruction in a way I can't conceive of him doing a year ago. He's doing a great job. Everything is moving quicker. At the Port Authority, when they wanted to do the helix, they said 3 years. And David Steiner said, that's no longer acceptable. You go back and figure out how to do it now. When they had to change a swap of land between Port, New Jersey, and the port to build a new power station, I'm trying very hard to do that. This is so important that you need to be aware of that fact, how others have changed already. They decided that that swap of land wouldn't wait for Jersey City to clean it up, that they would take the initiative and clean it up themselves. That's a new way of doing business. They want the job done now, not a long time from now. And Howard's taken that initiative to get that job done as quickly as possible. He's changed. I've changed. I'm doing things I didn't think I could do years ago. And you're going to have to change and make it possible for me to sit down with various agencies here and have a discussion so I don't have to do it here. Thank you.
Next public speaker is Bill Henderson, PCAC.
Good morning. First, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all those at the Long Island Railroad and Metro North Railroad and their efforts for preparing for and recovering from Hurricane Irene, Tropical Storm Irene, whatever it was when it came in. It was wet. It was wet. It was windy, and caused a lot of damage. And we sincerely thank you for everything you did and the speed with which you brought back the systems. We know the job isn't quite done on Port Jervis line, and we saw some of the pictures this morning, and we'll see them. But we know that you performed admirably, and we'd like to congratulate you on a job well done. In view of what's happened, I'd like to note that in the proposed 2012 budget that was presented in July, Long Island Railroad included funding for communication improvements. Hurricane Irene highlighted the need for communication with riders. Despite the best efforts of the railroads, we heard reports of riders who were unsure of the status of service and confused by contradictory information, some of which appeared on station platform displays. We encourage both railroads to redouble their efforts to ensure the communications with the riders are as complete and explicit as possible, even in difficult situations like those that were faced before, after, and during Hurricane Irene. Communications is really what the riders want. I mean, they realize that there are difficult situations that full service can't be provided, but they want to know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. First thing, I need a motion to approve the minutes of July 25th. I guess second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? 2011 work plan. Okay. Any changes to the work plan? None? Yeah. We'll move on. Okay, status of operations.
Okay, let me, before Bob starts, just a couple of points I want to make. First, I want to report back on, with regard to the hurricane. It's very clear that the plan that the MTA developed that affected Metro North and all the other agencies with an orderly shutdown and then bringing the service back after the storm worked very, very well. And we're very, very pleased about that. And on behalf of Metro North, I want to thank all the employees many of whom worked excessive hours, both shutting down the system, which is a major undertaking, as well as bringing it back up as quickly as it did. And I think the strategy clearly was the right strategy because of the quickness with which we were able to restore the service. The one place that, and I will be talking later about this, that's not been the case is on the Port Jervis line, and we'll have a full discussion about that later. Two other things I want to mention is that on October 16th, we are going to be starting our pilot for the quiet car on the Upper Hudson trains and the Upper Harlem trains. Those are the through trains, long-distance through trains from Wassaic and Poughkeepsie. It's similar to what we did west of Hudson. That was a huge success. I had reported on to the board earlier. People were very pleased with the west of Hudson, so we are now going to try it east of Hudson. We'll be monitoring this in a full program, and then based on that, we'll make a determination on how to, if and how to expand the program further. This is on, I should add, this is on rush hour trains on those two lines, and the quiet car will be the furthest northern car, so furthest away from the block at Grand Central, and we'll be following the same basic procedures we did west of Hudson, which is based on what New Jersey Transit did in terms of a self-enforcement by customers. Finally, I want to mention we're also doing a pilot on bicycle hooks, something that we have been asked about for many years. We have a pilot on a few cars, M8 cars. Pilots being paid for by the state of Connecticut. We are going to monitor that, and depending on the results of that as well as funding, this is right now we have no funding to do anything like this. We would look to expand the program, assuming people like it and assuming the funding exists. So those are three programs I wanted to bring you up further up to date on, and I'll talk about Port Jervis in a couple of minutes in the agenda.
Okay, Bob, status of operations.
All right, good morning, everyone. The status of operations starts on page 19 in your agenda book. System OTP for the month of August was 96.8%. The Hudson line ran at 97.7%. The Harlem line ran at 96.7%. And the New Haven line ran at 96.4%. Should be noted that prior to the hurricane, our system OTP was actually 97.5, so the hurricane cost us 0.8% for the monthly OTP. For the month, the AM peak was at 97.4, and the PM was at 96.8. For the month of August, there were only 5 days in which the OTP was below 95%, and of those 5, 3 were below 90, and 2 of those were as a result of the aftermath from the hurricane. A total of 548 trains operated late out of 17,143. Consist compliance for east of Hudson for the month of August was at 99.4%. The Hudson line was at 99.9. The Harlem was at 99.8, and the New Haven line was at 98.8. On the west of Hudson service operated at 96.4% in August, which is at our goal of 96.4. 56 trains operated late out of 1,535. The Port Jervis line operated at 95.9% in August, above a goal of 95.5, and the Pascagoula Valley operated at 96.6 in August, below goal of 97. The MDBF, mean distance between failure information, that's outlined on page 23 in your agenda book. The goal is 125,000. The overall fleet MDBF for the month of July was at 145,254. Note the BL20s is still low availability due to compressor problems. We are working on a new software control for that, which will be installed as part of a retrofit program that is just underway. So, and if there's any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I noticed on page 20 that trains over 15 minutes late have virtually doubled. Why?
Well, we had a couple of events. We had a tree event that took place on the Harlem line, and that delayed most trains more than 15%. The hurricane, the 2 days following the hurricane, where we ran, I think, 79 and 80-some%, those delays were greater than 15 minutes. And then we had in the PM on August, can't remember the exact day, we had a shutdown. We lost power in our control center due to an UPS failure. And we actually lost everything for about 34 minutes. So hence the greater number of 15-minute delays for the month. I think it was 177 for the month, which wasn't very high.
On page 21, you indicate that one of the problems was the loss of communications on the PM side.
Yes.
And on the off-peak. What plan do you have in place to deal with those communication issues?
It was actually a human failure where an emergency button on a UPS panel was inadvertently pushed while some testing was going on. So we took a little proactive approach and put an actual a cover over that so that you cannot accidentally brush into the emergency stop button. They basically took the
Are you
UPS.
doing that just on that train, or are you doing it on every other?
No, it wasn't on a train. It was in the control center. It's one of two units, uninterrupted power supply units.
On page 25, it appears that the New Haven line has been subject to quadruple increase in standees. Why?
Well, we have had some shortages of equipment, and hence you see that it's usually the New Haven line that is short on the consist compliance. They are at 98.8 versus the other two lines which were at 99.9. We continue to have some problems with the 2s, the 4s, and 6s. The 8s are coming, though, and we've got 3 train sets on board and hope to have 56 or so cars by the end of the year, and that number should turn itself around.
Let me just all due to the lack of cars?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
So, Chuck, let me just add, you see that the year-to-date is much higher than the month of August.
Yep.
That's reflecting last winter when we had to put in that reduced schedule, and the numbers were extremely high. So the numbers have come down dramatically since April when we were able to get the cars back. But to answer your basic question, yes, we do not have enough cars yet on the New Haven line because of the high out of service of the older cars. So we're still struggling to get stability.
Where are you with Kawasaki?
As Bob mentioned, we have, I believe it's 36 cars on the property. We're anticipating to have between 50 and 60 by the end of the year. So they are coming. The new cars that are being made in Nebraska, the first of those, we have 4 of them, right, Tim, have showed up in New Haven. So we're starting to get the equipment, starting to get the new cars that are being manufactured in Nebraska.
When they arrive, will you be able, hopefully, to reduce the standee situation?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is absolutely yes. I will say that we will still face we'll be at risk this winter, depending on the weather, depending on what it does to the older cars. Last year, we had upwards of 40 to 50% of the older cars out of service. If we face that again because of the winter, we will again have a standee problem, regardless of the M8s. By the end of next year, I can tell you we'll have enough M8s that won't be an issue.
I'm glad you put that out front so that people can be aware that this problem can be a recurring one this coming winter. Right. And is that also true with respect to the increase in the trains late on the New Haven line?
The issue on the New Haven line, Chuck, there are 2 pieces. The equipment certainly is a major contributor, and the more M8s we get, the less we'll have. However, the second contributor is the infrastructure on the New Haven line. That will not be fixed for many years. That was the problem this summer, when we have catenary that's 100 years old, the bridge is 120 years old. That will not be fixed anytime soon. So there's a program Connecticut has to fix it, but as long as we're faced with a 100-year-old catenary, we get hot weather, or we get very cold weather, or something else happens, when that fails, you have significant delays.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Bob? Kim?
Oh, 1 second. Let me do the safety report. Ann Kirsch.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll just briefly review the employee and customer safety statistics through July, and that information can be found on in your books beginning on page 32. Our total employee injuries through July are approximately 36% over the total injuries for the same period in 2010, and our total customer injuries through July are also approximately 36% over the total for the same period in 2010. If you remove, though, the January numbers from the employee totals, that then brings us down to about 8% year-to-date over last year for this same time period. So we are making some improvements there, and that can be seen if we take out the numbers from the horrific January that we had with the injuries. And for the customers, if you take out January and February, which were very high for us as well because of the winter, then we're about even for the same time period from 2010 through year-to-date. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions? Thank you. Now, Kim.
Okay, good morning. My report starts on page 36. This is the first time for which we report against the 2011 mid-year forecast. As a summary, that mid-year forecast reflects the net subsidies at the end of the year of $416.2 million for Metro North, slightly lower than what we started out with the 2011 budget, and that reduction is $2.5 million. That reflects slightly higher revenues of $4.5 million due to higher projections for ridership and offset by slightly higher expenses by $2.4 million, mainly to cover for the winter storm costs. And now in relation to that new mid-year forecast, year-to-date July 2011 net subsidies is $352.0 million, and it is $24.2 million, or 6.4% favorable to the mid-year forecast. Reasons for that is that farebox revenues is 0.1% favorable to the mid-year forecast, with ridership being 0.2% favorable to the mid-year forecast. Now, this mid-year forecast reflected east of Hudson ridership as being 0.6% higher than our 2011 budget we started out with, and 1.3% higher than 2010 actuals. So it's the good news that we're tracking to that. On the expenditure side, we did incur some additional overtime costs, and that has related to the maintenance work to achieve the car concept and availability, as well as significant mud spot work related to the very wet July that we incurred. On the expenditure side, those are mainly on the payroll expenditure side, those are mainly favorable due to just timing in project work on a reimbursable as well as non-reimbursable side. Then to recap everything is year-to-date July, adjusted FOR for Metro North is 76.5%, and that is 2% favorable, mainly due to lower expenditures. And our cost per passenger adjusted is $11.62, and that is 35 cents favorable to the forecast, mainly due to, once again, reduced expenditures. And I'll switch over to Bob for ridership.
Good morning. The July ridership report is in your book starting on page 71. On the evidence of an August meeting.
May I ask a question, please, of
Sure.
Ms. Porcelain? Ms. Porcelain, your overtime for July is significantly increased, and that there are vacancies in station clearing positions on page 45. What I'd like to know specifically is that in July you had a reduction in maintenance away and equipment producing higher overtime. Now, it seems to me that if you have these vacancies there and you have the problems in terms of maintenance, why do that and then at the same time add 12 supervisors rather than maintenance? The addition of the supervisors is reflected on page 49. Page 49, maintenance supervisors. Added 12.
Could you restate your question? The maintenance supervisors, we have actually higher number of supervisors and managers in that department by count of 12 FTEs, and that is for the maintenance of equipment department.
But what you've done is you've provided for the people who do the actual work, you've increased the overtime that is attributable to their work while adding supervisors. I don't understand that. Why do you do it overtime? Why don't you just bring people back to do the work?
It's not clear. I apologize. It's not clear to me the relationships that you're conveying here. But the overtime that we have incurred is mainly due to the work that's happening in the shop. It was in the beginning to do the repairs, to get the car consist back in place, as well as HVAC work for the summer, and the mud spot work that happens due to the wet weather.
My issue is really this. Fundamentally, you have a significant amount of overtime. I don't quarrel with its appropriateness. I don't quarrel with its necessity. You have a significant amount of overtime among those who do the maintenance activity. You don't bring in additional maintenance workers to do that. You give overtime to those. But you do bring in 12 new supervisors on a full-time basis. How do you rationalize that?
Yeah, Chuck, can we get maybe off afterwards, get back to you and we can explain? We can kind of walk through what happened.
Okay.
That may be, I think, the most effective way.
Okay.
Okay.
I might just have one small point. I raised this several months ago. The training, the category of training, it's 8 favorable. I just wonder, is there still problems with getting people to be?
Which page are you on?
I'm sorry, page 48. And is that making any significant? I mean, we haven't had enough people in the training area for quite some time.
Yes.
As a percentage of the total amount of people who work.
Yes. We are working very diligently to fill out the training department so it can do 2 things. One is we are anticipating we will have a significant turnover of employees over the next few years in Metro North as we get closer to 2013 in that area. We need to be able to train their replacements. The second issue is there are significant new federal regulations that were passed in 2008 that require all kinds of additional training. So we are working to basically get the appropriate manning in training. This number is showing a vacancy.
Right.
We are working to, I anticipate within a matter of a few months, we will be past that, and we will be at a place where the training department is up and fully running.
But for those reasons, that's why I'm asking that,
Yeah.
that we need them. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Bob, ridership.
The July ridership report is in your book starting on page 71. In the absence of an August meeting, this is the first time you're seeing July data. July was a good month. Overall, rail ridership was up 2.9%. Commutation ridership was up 1.7%. Non-commutation rail ridership was up 4.3%. You emailed out last week the preliminary numbers for August 2011. I'll briefly summarize those. Rail ridership and all these numbers are dramatically affected by the hurricane or tropical storm. Rail ridership in August was down 5.4% versus August 2010. Rail commutation ridership was off 2.7%, and non-com rail ridership was down 8.9% compared to the same month last year. Overall total system ridership was down 5.4%. We took a look at what we thought August would be absent the hurricane based on ticket sales up through before the hurricane started. Absent the hurricane, we estimate that August ridership would have been up about 2% compared to last year. So that means that the storm had an impact of approximately 500,000 rides on Metro North in August, which is a little over 7%, almost 7.5% swing from up 2 to down 5.4 is the impact of the storm. Year to date, and again, these numbers are also affected by the hurricane. Year to date ridership through August is rail ridership is up 0.8%. With the absence of the hurricane, probably would have been about 1.8. So that's about 1% year to date impact of the storm. Commutation ridership is up 1.1, and rail non-com ridership is up 0.4% for the first 8 months of 2011. Any questions?
No questions. Capital, Tim.
Good morning. Capital report begins on page 82. Very briefly, I'd like to report to you that our inbound Upper Hudson services has returned to normal Track 2 operation as the work in Tarrytown is progressing and that portion of the platform work has been completed. You'll see at Tarrytown there's a lot of work going on. You can see the canopy steel going up on the 2-4 platform. That project is going very well, and it's progressing on schedule. As Howard had mentioned earlier, we've got the first 4 cars on the property from Lincoln, and they're undergoing testing right now. There are 2 more on the way, and all of the cars are finally shipped from Kobe. So that was the initial 38 cars. The last 4 are en route. 2 of them should be in Baltimore today, and 2 are not quite a month away. We're working on, as Howard said, we're running the 3 train sets on a daily basis. We've been running limited weekend service with those cars just so that the technicians could get access to them in case there's anything to work on. We're looking at adding the 2nd train set probably this coming weekend. We tried to get it in this past weekend, but we couldn't do that. And lastly, with regards to the hurricane work, I'd just like to report that we did utilize one of our contractors who's doing work at Croton, Harmon, Peekskill, and Cortland to help us with recovery work on the Hudson line and delivering some stone to the Upper Harlem line, and with a major mudslide we had at Spite and Dival where a building we thought was in danger of collapse, and it wasn't, but there was a huge mudslide there, and Echo 3, one of our contractors, performed a lot of work for us in helping us get that work done. And if anybody has any questions.
I just want to give you a comment. I think you will find, if you get a chance to look at it, that you have the same potential as you had at Villa Bronte in the area immediately to the north of the West 254th Street station, where you have the same kind of steep slope and problem in terms of mud, and there you have trees down from the hurricane that can also wash onto the track. It's worth taking a look at.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Is that by the Hebrew Home for the Aged?
It's both at the Hebrew Home and below it, between the Hebrew Home and West 254th Street.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
Yes,
Jim.
Thank you. Just Tim, a quick question about concrete ties. We've worked over concrete ties as an issue in past years, and I just wondered whether they were still in the cyclical track program.
I think I'll defer to Bob on that. He's more of an expert.
No, they are not. Right now, we have completed the replacement of all of the defective concrete ties. We finished the last stretch up this year. I think we have a couple of small pocket in Harmon that still needs to be taken care of by hand, but no, for now and for the foreseeable future, that'll be it for concrete tie renewal. We don't intend to advance concrete tie at this point in time. We're strictly with our wood cycle program right now.
Any other questions? Okay, information items. Mid-year 2011 mid-year forecast. Kim.
This is just an informational item. It's just a mid-year forecast annualized month by month for which we'll track against for the remainder of this year until actually even with the year-end forecast as well. So we'll track against this.
Any questions regarding the mid-year forecast that we've received? Okay. Any questions on the preliminary operating budget that we've received? Strategic investments. I have a question.
Jim,
Yes.
on those, I'm just, I don't know if I can speak for the committee, but it seemed to me that a document that is that involved really needed to be summarized to kind of just position it relative to the original budget. I know Kim gave it a shot in her oral presentation at the beginning, but there's a lot that goes in it, and this goes across agencies. And I just registered that as a suggestion for the future.
Jim, you're talking about the mid-year forecast or the operating budget?
The mid-year forecast.
Okay, strategic investments and planning. I have one question regarding page 120. When can we expect the results of the MTA study regarding the future allocation of peak slots into Penn Station?
That's a study that's being done by MTA
Yes.
Planning under Charlie Monheim's efforts, so I will have to find out. I don't have his schedule. I will ask Charlie.
John?
Permit me one question and two comments. On page 110, what are you leasing? Station net leasing program.
We've had a program, Chuck, for many years where we have station buildings and many big old station buildings on Metro North. And we've had a program to attempt to net lease them out that has two basic purposes. The first is to get outside parties to expend the money to fix up the station, and B, maintain it and operate it on an ongoing basis instead of us. The second is to raise money by bringing in a tenant so you get better use of the space than we'll just have it open as a ticket office. And thirdly, it brings life to the community. And so in a place like Hartsdale, where we have the Starbucks there, it's become one of the key spots people go to. So it's been a multi-year program. What's being reported here is the current status. We have a number of stations already net leased, and we're continuing the program to try to get more net leased.
So you net lease space that you do not yourself use for the customers or for the station?
Well, what we normally do, there are different varieties. The customers use them. One of their main markets will be people taking the train who will come in to buy coffee or eat. Some places it's a joint station and commercial area. Each one is different depending on the station.
Well done. I have two comments, if I may. On page 120, it seems to me that we ought to give some accelerated attention to the possibility of providing access by way of stations to people who would use the same lines at Hunts Point, at Parkchester, Melrose, and Co-op City, where we would attract literally tens of thousands of additional potential customers. The Borough President of the Bronx has set forth in quite clear detail how this can work, how this can provide additional accommodation and additional passengers for us at no great inflated cost. It may be, indeed, that the only cost involved, and it's not a small cost, is the cost of building a station. But there are literally thousands of people in Parkchester, tens of thousands in Co-op City, who would be finally getting an opportunity to have some mass transit to take them to New York City in a more rapid fashion. I know it's on your agenda, but I ask you please to give it particular attention. The second point is, I feel equally passionately about the idea of this west of Hudson train access study that we've really got to do. If we're going to make use out of places like Stewart Air Force Base, or if the people in Putnam and elsewhere are going to have an opportunity to have good, sound transit, this is important. It ought to be placed very far in front of the agenda.
I just add to Chuck's comment, which I echo, which is that's especially true in light of the fact that those folks pay payroll mobility tax.
That's correct.
Susan.
A couple of comments and a question. First, to support Chuck on the Penn Station access point, and I have no skin in this, so pardon my snarky, but I remember we discussed this some time ago, more than a year ago, and I thought that that report was going to be completed in the first quarter. Now, you are not, in my book, a wild-eyed optimist, but I recall that it was the first quarter. So what's the delay? This seems like a no-brainer to me.
Well, let me go back to Charlie. I think
Okay.
that's the best. He's
Okay.
the best one to answer that.
Although I would like to say considerable progress has absolutely been made on the simulation of train movements out of Penn. And there's been, tremendous amount of effort with an outside consultant to evaluate the manipulation of train service in and out of Penn to determine whether any additional trains can fit into Penn. And that work has pretty much reached a summary conclusion, and it goes to the Tri-Venture Council with Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, Long Island Railroad, and MTA representatives. And the basic conclusion has been that it would be very difficult to manipulate trains to include any new trains into Penn.
Well, I think it's helpful for us to have some reports on it, but I do think most of us would like to see that because it does provide access to people in the Bronx, which is a sadly underserved area for transit. But in any event...
So that's why I will find out from Charlie and ask him to get back to the committee.
With respect to the Port Jervis line, is the cab signaling contract moving ahead even though we've had such an issue?
Yes, we are proceeding with cab signaling.
So that's going ahead.
Yes.
And then lastly, I'd like to comment, and I'm going to include Long Island Railroad in this. I'm really happy to see that both railroads exceeded their goals on the mentoring program. The mentoring program as a whole exceeded its goal, but I have to give a hats off to Long Island Railroad because Long Island Railroad exceeded the goal by greater than any of the other organizations, and it's really wonderful to see. I'm very pleased to see that the railroads embrace the program, as have the other agencies, but hats off to you. Thanks.
Sure. Just one footnote on both points on page 120. This governor has demonstrated a commitment to try and revitalize areas of population of business that have really been under strain. And we really have got to give this an extremely high priority to achieve the governor's program, in my view.
So
whether it be the west of Hudson described on page 120, that study that you're going to talk to Charlie about, or it be the creation of stations in areas that have no mass transit facility.
I'm going to talk to Charlie about the Penn Station one, not the west of Hudson. That's ours.
Jim.
Thank you, Jim. If you would bear with me, I want to make just a few quick questions, and if it's not convenient to answer them at this point, then we'll take it offline. A comment first that one of the benefits of having a joint committee such as this is that we do learn from one another, and in this case, I think that the format that is used by Long Island in this report bears some consideration, in that it does, first of all, contain an introductory section that describes the overall goals and the various parts of the report, which I think is helpful for the board, and secondly, associates dollar amounts with each of the categories of strategic investments. And Metro North might want to consider following that format or incorporating some elements of it into our own presentation. On page 101, I would just make a comment on the M3 car performance improvement program. The numbers there are fantastic, and I just wanted to have my recollection refreshed on whether that program has been curtailed or is it going to continue?
No, that program was completed, and we're finishing up some interior work. There's a small amount left. to bring the interiors up to a state of good repair, and then the program is done.
Yeah. Okay. Because when you can get that kind of additional life out of a car, it's been
a very successful program for us, and then the cars go into regular cyclical maintenance.
Yeah. On page 102, and I just guess generally the M9s. The M9s are referred to in some detail on the Long Island side. This does, I assume, not speak to that generation of cars for Metro North?
No. We did not address the M9s in the report. We're working with the Long Island Railroad on looking at some type of a joint procurement that would be staged over time, would include likely different equipment types, but we're working with the Long Island on that. It's just not in this report.
Okay. So those decisions have not been made as to type or
correct
on with regard to Metro North.
That is correct.
Okay. Apologize. Yeah. Okay, I think that should do it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Howard.
Okay, so the next section is I wanted to give the board an update on the Port Jervis line. I have sent a couple of memos out to keep people informed, but I think this is very important to bring everyone up to date as to where we stand. Very quickly, Port Jervis line, it's operated by New Jersey Transit. Infrastructure repair is Metro North's responsibility, so we're the ones who have to fix this line. The New York State portion is 60 miles. It's basically a single track with some double track and passing sidings. The access to the right-of-way is extremely limited. In the area you see, go back please, the area you see right here between Harriman and Suffern is where the catastrophic damage occurred. So, next slide please. So, on the storm, as I talked before, we had a proactive service plan to shut everything down. We did that over here as well. We had a 2-day storm. In this area, we had rainfall of greater than 10 inches, which did severe damage, you probably know, to the entire Metro North system. We had severe flooding, we had mudslides, we had trees, washouts. The place where it was worse by far, and where we still are not back fully in service, is the Port Jervis line. So, next slide please. Within hours after the storm, we were out assessing the condition of the railroad, and we knew by late Sunday night that we had catastrophic damage in these 14 miles. And I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute, but we had the roadbed washed away, exposed signal cable, twisted track, bridge structures were exposed we didn't know the damage, significant bank erosion. But to the 45 miles between Harriman and Port Jervis had damage, but it was not that bad. We knew we could not operate train service on the line. So here are a few pictures. So this shows you the flooding on the line. You can see where the river crossed the right-of-way here and undercut the entire right-of-way. Next one. This shows where the river overflowed its banks and undermined the track. The track has no support underneath it. Next one, please. This shows the flooding, how it undercut the track here. We could not do inspections for the better part of 10 days on the Port Jervis line because there was so much water. You may recall we had another storm, severe storm over in Orange and Rockland that happened the following week. Next one. So here we see some places where we may need future culverts to deal with future flooding, where water came off the hillsides. Undermining of the track again. And actually over here we're missing a track. There used to be track over here on the right. Next one, please. And here's a significant damage to significant washout on the bridge, and this is something that we had to then inspect to see what the impact was. Next one, please. So that showed, and I will tell you that in my career I have never seen damage like this on any right-of-way. In the history of Metro North, we have never seen anything that comes close to this level of damage. So we started, the first priority we had was to provide the customers with alternative service. And I want to say here that we, Metro North, with the absolutely terrific cooperation of MTA Bus, was able to put together a plan within a matter of days. Within 2 days, we were running bus service. We started it. We rolled it out over a period of about 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, every single train on the Port Jervis line at every station had a bus taking somebody someplace. So we basically, in this period of a week or two, created a new bus company. It had 60 buses with operating 6 routes, making 140 trips a day. We had buses, and we still have buses who are coming up every day from New York City, including Staten Island and the Bronx, to provide the service. We had to develop this plan and communicate it. And it was a terrific effort. And again, I want to thank MTA Bus for all their efforts, and it really shows the synergy within the family in how that works together to customers' benefit. We also we added some parking, we relaxed parking policies, we did some fare policies, all to make it easier for the people in Port Jervis to get into New York City. On Monday, the 19th, which was last Monday, we restored partial train service. This, again, was an enormous undertaking. Because of our institutional arrangements with New Jersey Transit, this is extremely complicated. This is not simply Metro North making the decisions. We have a partner who has their own very legitimate interests in terms of how they're serving their customers. We worked with MTA Bus to create yet a new bus plan. We did repair the damage between Harriman and Port Jervis. We inspected the right-of-way, inspected the signal system, ran the test equipment. And so on Monday, we started train service. We operate 17 trains, which is about 65% of the service. It's peak period service only. It takes people from Port Jervis to Harriman. Then there are buses that go from Harriman Express to Ramsey, where they get on other New Jersey Transit trains. New Jersey has added trains using our equipment, which we move from Port Jervis down onto the main Bergen line. We've added buses in Harriman, so it's really every 10 to 20 minutes there's an express bus to New Jersey. The key thing here is it's much more reliable than the bus plan. People are starting to get to work at the times they like. I will tell you that this is a much longer trip for many people than they used to have, so people are not happy about it. But it is, under the circumstance, the best service that can be provided until we fix the line. And we will look to keep this service in place until the line is fixed. So our second goal was to rebuild the line and restore service as quickly as possible. The chairman acted quickly. He gave emergency powers to myself to contract for goods and services to fix the line, put all the resources behind the MTA, behind the rebuilding. The MTA has begun an all-out effort to get money back from FEMA and insurance. Now that's across the MTA family. This is the biggest damage within the family is this line. And he directed the MTO CFO, Bob Foran, to identify the funding to pay for this restoration efforts. So we have already moved very quickly. Subsequent to this, we made the repairs, as I mentioned, between Harriman and Port Jervis. We also contacted with an engineering firm to do an emergency assessment of the line. Okay, next. So here today is what I'm going to report to you on that and then our plans going forward. Basically, within this 14 miles, half the line had little or no damage. Bridge inspections showed that there was some damage, not as extensive as we thought. Signal system had a fair amount of damage with water infiltration, exposed cables. Within the right-of-way, here's where you had major damage. We had 50 washouts, which totaled over 2 miles, which means the track is suspended. It has no grade in this area. Much of the track is hanging in midair right now, significant erosion of the banks, and this is what's going to take the time to fix before we can bring back train service. So our plan is that we are going to restore train service by the end of 2011. We have directed AECOM to make this happen. We've directed AECOM to do a phased rebuilding plan. So phase 1 will be all the work needed to restore on one track between Harriman and Suffern. So what this involves is building access roads to get to the site. We've hired somebody. They started that work last week. Rebuilding the track, replacing the ballast, doing the work on the undergrade bridges, also protecting the right-of-way with slopes and potential retaining walls. This work is going to be done by a third-party contractor and by Metro-North forces. The contractor will be working 24/7. It'll be around-the-clock operation. We'll put in both financial incentives and penalties to move them to get this done as quickly as possible. We're saying this will be done by the end of the year. The only caveat I would give you, if we have another major storm that could affect this infrastructure is severely compromised, and any type of major storm would do significant damage to the right-of-way. At the end of this phase one, by the end of the year, we will then go back to a full train schedule. The times will be slightly different because we still will not have the second track and some of the other infrastructure, but we will run the same number of trains. We will have some busing on weekends and off-peak. To make this happen, we began the work. AECOM has begun their design work. MTA Real Estate has negotiated agreements with owners so we can get to the right-of-way. We have already contracted with a number of third parties to assist our forces in the restoration. We've also contracted for all the fill. And to put it in context, we are estimating we'll need about 150,000 tons of fill for this line. That is the equivalent of 5,000 tractor-trailer dump trucks. So it gives you some idea of the amount of damage that we're looking at. We have the contracts in place. The other thing we are looking at, working with Michael, is to see if we can use any of the fill from either 2nd Avenue or East Side Access to help supplement what we're getting from the private quarries. The entire line will be restored by the fall of 2012. The second phase, what that does is it rebuilds the second track we need. It repairs the signal system, turns it to service, it'll complete bridge repairs, and it'll also be, importantly, it'll stabilize the riverbank along the right-of-way, giving us the necessary slope protection and other flood mitigations to protect the line in the future. And we anticipate this will be done by the fall. At this point in time, we will then restore full train service. The one other thing I do want to mention is, given the amount of work in a 24/7 contract out in a fairly remote area, this will all be very carefully monitored to make sure that the work that we believe is happening, we plan to happen, is actually going on. In terms of the costs, we're estimating that the cost will be $60 million to both provide the interim service and rebuild the line. There are certain other impacts which we don't know yet. We've just started the conversation with New Jersey Transit as to what the impact is on New Jersey Transit. Both there have some cost savings and also extra costs. We have lost revenue. Bob Ferran is working to identify the necessary funds on the reconstruction effort. And Metro-North and MTA staff are working on the reimbursement side. And this goes to insurance reimbursement, it goes to the FEMA reimbursement, and we also put in a special tracking mechanism to make sure we track all our costs so they're eligible for both FEMA and insurance. So in terms of the next steps, we're going to ask you, it's on page 131, to ratify several actions this month. One is the Chairman's Declaration of Emergency. The other is the emergency contract with AECOM to do the assessment. I'll be bringing to you over the next months other contracts. The major contract, third-party reconstruction contract, we're anticipating awarding it in early October, so I bring that to you thereafter. I see that happening over the next few months. And finally, we are working with both our communications folks and the MTA communication folks to have a very active presence out in Orange and Rockland counties to keep people informed over the next months as to what we're doing, working very closely both with Carl and Susan to help us and make that happen. So that is our plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions on this program.
Howard,
yeah.
I'm on the other side.
Oh. I couldn't see. I heard a voice.
What percent, I have two questions basically, what percent do you expect to come from third-party reimbursement that you discussed?
Yeah. John, we don't know yet. We have an insurance policy that's an MTA-wide policy, so we are going in with that policy, working with Lorene Coyne. I don't know if Lorene is here, from MTA Risk Management. So that's the first piece. Then we're looking at the FEMA piece as well. And so we don't have a good sense yet. The goal would be to get everything reimbursed. That would be the goal, and then we work backwards. There are all kinds of complications of what's eligible and not, and so we're really in the middle of that process.
Okay, if you keep us informed. But I guess
Sure.
I should have started with you and the chairman and everyone should be commended with the great work you've done on working so rapidly under such difficult circumstances. So thank you for all of your efforts.
Okay, thank you.
And I have my second question. How can we feel comfortable with respect to, obviously you're responding to emergency situation, and again, as I said, should be commended for that, but with respect to cost controls, you have emergency contracts on engineering and on construction, and how do we feel comfortable that the costs are being managed? Whether or not they get reimbursed, of course,
Right.
is to be determined in the future.
Right. Well, keep doing this while meeting our goals, doing this in the most cost-effective way has been one of my goals throughout. And so when we meet within Metro North, this is the single priority now for the whole management team. There are regular conversations regarding not only the work we're doing, but how we are going to try to control the costs. So that is very paramount in what we're doing. It's always a fine line balancing, trying to bring back the service, provide enough bus service, while what is also costing.
Are the contracts, to the extent they're not both engineering and construction, like being undertaken due to the emergency nature of this in the ordinary competitive fashion, how do we know we have protections?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point, and I should have said that. When we got the first contract, which was the engineering assessment, it was a competitive process for pre-qualified firms. This engineering, what we're now doing for the big construction contract, will be a bid. It will be an RFP, but we will have competition. So we are looking for competition throughout. When we came to the fill contracts, we have 4 different companies, so there's some competition there as well. So we're always looking in each case. I can't say it'll always be the case, but we are trying to maximize the competition.
Okay, thank you. The competition from already qualified firms sounds like an excellent way to go with that.
Yeah, that worked out really well.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Howard, quick question. Did the chairman's declaration of emergency lead to truncated regulatory processes than would have been the case in the absence of it?
Pat, I do not think so. I don't know, Seth, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, did the chairman's declaration of an emergency lead to truncated, secret, and other processes than what would have been in place in the absence of it?
Under 1265 of the Public Authorities Law, there are special procedures when he declares an emergency.
A couple of things. First of all, more of my county than just the railroad was damaged by the storm, and there have been emergency powers invoked in that area so that some of the normal regulatory processes are at least lifted for the time being, and that extends not only to the railroad but to other things that have to be done. I can't express not only my appreciation but my admiration for what Metro North has done enough. 2 days after this storm, when our roads were still out, we still can't get into our county government center, we still have roads out, we started a partial service to get people back into the city and to their jobs. I realize that we've still got a long way to go. I saw the Metro North staff immediately start dealing with trying to fix a devastated railroad and trying to provide alternative service, reaching out to my county exec, reaching out to my county planning department so that communications were there. I see those efforts continuing on a weekly basis. I appreciate that. But I also want to say that I know Metro North couldn't have done this alone. This was an MTA-wide effort. I appreciate what MTA Bus did. It was an incredible effort. I appreciate what Jay has done to provide funding for us from the MTA perspective. I have often been a critic of the payroll tax and other ways that the MTA region is funded, but I have to say that I really saw the MTA as a whole reach out to a small part of its region that was devastated unexpectedly and try to make it whole and provide our service back to us, and that is very much to be appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add that, while we've seen an awful lot of this in the newspaper and we've seen it on TV, a number of us did make the trek up there and walk the line. It is far more devastating than you can ever imagine. It's just impossible to believe something like that nature could take that kind of but we had tracks sticking up in the air. I mean, it looked like it was ore rather than a flood. But again, got to commend the MTA and all the agencies for helping in and jumping in and helping. Okay, any other questions? Action items, Howard.
Okay. So we have 3 action items. First, on page 128, it's the approval of the Fairfield Metro Station fares. This is the new station that will be opening this fall by the state of Connecticut.
Can I get a motion? So moved. Second? All in favor? Aye. Anybody against? Carried.
Okay, on 130, we have the acceptance of some CMAQ grants for connecting services.
Motion? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Okay, and the third item is the one I referenced. It's the ratification of the chairman's emergency declaration, as well as the contract to AECOM for the assessment.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried.
Good, thank you.
Okay. I am going to pause for a moment, and this is difficult to do when we go from, hearing the really wonderful response to address the Port Jervis service. I'm going to ask that we begin our portion of the meeting with just a moment of silence to recognize Russell G. Check. Russell was a road car inspector. He came in contact with the Third Rail on August 14th and was electrocuted. He passed away. And it's been a very difficult issue for Long Island Railroad and its employees. We've worked hard to conduct an investigation. We're working with the FRA on that safety investigation. And I would like to point out that New York City Transit's Chaplain Division has done an extraordinary job of working with our employees and with Russell D. Check's family. So in memory of Russell, I ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. With that, I am going to open up my remarks with regard to the East River tunnels. And I know Ray has some comments about Hurricane Irene. I'm going to leave that on our operation report. But one, because I know we're going to get compressed on time, it is extremely important that I address for this committee the progress we're making on the East River tunnel repairs that need to be undertaken. And just to refresh everybody's memory on this, and it's difficult when you recount all of the events that have not gone well. April 18th was the first night of Passover. There was 2 insulated joints that were broken in Line 3 of the East River tunnels. And then on Mother's Day, Amtrak, which was using our Line 3, we predominantly use that line, had a derailment of an equipment train traveling at about 60 miles per hour. As you'll recall, service was interrupted for Long Island Railroad for the better part of a week. I had conducted an inspection. I asked Amtrak if I could see the damage in the tunnels. Ray and I and our chief engineer, Bob Puslowski, did a walkthrough in the tunnel. We observed substantial amounts of water pooling, and we asked Amtrak to begin addressing that immediately. Chairman Jay Walder contacted Joe Boardman, followed it up with a letter. Joe Boardman for Amtrak responded immediately. There were many elected officials, including our governor, our Washington Senator Schumer, our state senator Chuck Fusillo, board members who all echoed the need for Amtrak's immediate response to the conditions in the East River tunnels. Joe Boardman, the Chief Executive Officer of Amtrak, responded with both a short-term plan as well as a long-term way in which he wanted to address the East River tunnels. The short-term plan began immediately, June, July, and August, with some immediate repairs. He has suggested that the parties meet to go over track replacement schedules for the long-term plan. And I'm just going to throw you a couple of slides up. If I could ask you to hit the lights and do the slides very quickly. Okay. We've worked with Amtrak, and they presented 3 options for total track replacement. That includes all ties, running rail, third rail, ballast, and most importantly, making the drainage repairs. And the lids to the drainage systems need to be redesigned and reinstalled. Option 1 was to take one tunnel out of service continuously for 90 straight days, and that would have been a 1 year for 4 tracks. And that really would have a significant interruption in Long Island Railroad service. The second option was to take 2 tunnels out of service concurrently for 55-hour weekend periods. Project duration was 3 to 4 years, depending on moratorium weekends, which I'll outline. And then the third option was to take 1 tunnel out of service for 55-hour weekends, but it was only 1 tunnel, making the project 8 years long. After a lot of discussion with New Jersey Transit, Amtrak, and Long Island Railroad, and again, I want to compliment Ray in handling a number of workshops to work through these options. We elected option 2, which would be double track outages on weekends and some weeknights as they move materials, and that we could better manage those impacts by focusing on double track outages on weekends. That would bring the project up to 4 years. Let me just show you what the weekend schedule does look like on this slide. You know, we were looking at 52 weekends as the base year availability. There are holiday moratoriums, which we had to insist on with Amtrak. Sometimes their peak season travel doesn't coincide with our weekend travel requirements. So there were 8 weekends that we said we must ensure that we do not have double track outages. They need to maintain regular annual maintenance. That was about 6 weekends. Remaining available track replacement weekends would be 38. And while we will do a production schedule that shows 38 weeks for total track replacement, I want to point out that we all know there will be other weather conditions, there will be other issues that impact that 38 and bring that number down. Moving forward, the most important issue for us was to evaluate the impact of this production schedule. And one of the impacts will be on the East Side Access schedule. And we've been meeting with Mike Rodniciano and his team on East Side Access to identify where can the East River tunnel work be coincided with the East Side Access work, so that in fact East Side Access work is piggybacked on the schedule. We are going through that process right now. We are identifying where there are work conflicts. And again, I have to point out that, you know, with any major construction involving both East Side Access and the East River tunnels, what we're trying to do is maintain a working railroad so that we can provide reliable service. That means we have to line up the Herald infrastructure with the tunnels that are available, with the platforms that are available, so that we have a continuous railroad on which we can operate reliable train service. Amtrak has agreed to be very flexible in the tunnel work. They're going to sequence in the best way possible to accommodate East Side Access piggyback work and work that absolutely must be done to ensure sequencing of East Side Access work. We are going through a rebaselining where all the parties are working on a production schedule, including East Side Access's team, Amtrak, and we're even beginning to fold in some of the Farley work that has to be done under Phase 1 of the Moynihan project. So we intend to come out with a very global work schedule, and that is currently under review. We anticipate that baselining, the rebaselining of both East Side Access, the East River Tunnel work, will take a couple of months with a goal of getting it completed by the end of the year. We have been talking about the opportunities to ensure that this work goes forward in the most expeditious way possible. I am pleased to note that Amtrak committed new resources to the project so that it will not be pulling off resources from East Side Access, where catenary work, for example, has to be performed by Amtrak personnel. And in fact, Amtrak has appointed a new chief deputy of engineering for the Manhattan area. He will head up this work effort and allow, and it's of course not the only thing he's doing, but all of this Manhattan focus will be under the new jurisdiction of a deputy chief engineer. One of the ideas that we will be exploring is other ways to incentivize the work. I think that Michael will be looking at that with his contractors on East Side Access. We'll be looking at that in our relationship with Amtrak. Let me take any questions on this separately if I can before we go to operations.
Sure.
Yeah, Helena, two quick questions. One is Amtrak meeting its commitments and the railroad's expectations as to what ought to be happening here?
They are. I can affirmatively say they have done a very good job of meeting the commitments that were outlined in the Boardman letter in May.
Okay. Second question is for you and Michael, which is, given the fact that this could have a negative impact on East Side Access, which is an important project over a number of years involving literally billions of dollars, has someone done the calculus to figure out whether doing something financially with respect to the East River tunnels would, in the long run, save the MTA and the railroad money?
And that's one of the efforts we are undergoing right now in the rebaselining. And that's a very good question. On both sides, East Side Access and East River Tunnel work, are there ways in which we could incentivize the work so that we don't get delays that have cost impacts?
We are looking at it. We are looking at it right now as part of the rebaselining to make sure that that's incorporated organically in the whole approach, so we will be able to then, both of us, be able to see what are the benefits in the long run.
Which portion of the MTA network? Is it Michael's portion that will have responsibility for both the track work, the repair work, the tunnel work, all of it, or is it going to be divided up between LIRR and CPOP?
Right now, Long Island Railroad is taking the lead in ensuring that there is enough railroad infrastructure available for us to offer reliable train service, so that all of the planning that goes into tunnel outages is resting with us. Ray is chairing a multi-agency workshop on a weekly basis where we analyze the impacts of the outages that are proposed based on the infrastructure that would be available to run train service.
I raise the question because it's obvious, to me at least, that construction has considerable expertise and ability to move with great dexterity to do a job and has familiarity with this, and I wonder the extent to which it's being employed in the project.
Just a note that Long Island Railroad and East Side Access are working cooperatively on this thing, and in fact, we jointly and we brought in also MTA headquarters, Capital Construction, into an oversight or a task force, so to speak, in which Helena, myself, and Lena Kleinbaum are going to oversee the progress of this work as well as any particular impact that will going to occur. So this cannot happen in a vacuum. I think that the Long Island Railroad provides extremely important input regarding how that whole thing can be choreographed. It's really almost a ballet that needs to kind of come together. And we are a partner in that, and together with the Long Island Railroad, we expect to accomplish that. We're looking at the ability and how we can rebaseline and what mitigations we can put in place in order to in fact minimize such impacts.
I'm struck by the fact that you have both in the area of Port Jervis and in the tunnel two disasters that are going to require a great deal of money, great deal of effort, and are during the process of trying to deal with them, we are going to have a very significant adverse impact upon our customers. And what I'm trying to figure out is some way, if there is any, that we can coordinate all of these various things in a fashion that they are not just fast-tracked, but that they're super fast-tracked. It seems to me that the customer service is paramount, and getting back money for it must take second thought.
And the answer is yes. It actually, yes, and yes. You know.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep moving.
Let me
add one portion on that, and you know the necessary cooperation here between Amtrak and the Long Island Railroad is even more important than it has ever been. And for many of us who have absolutely no confidence at all in Amtrak and Amtrak's ability to do anything relating to Penn Station, that is of great concern. And Charles hit on one of those issues. The decision to take option 2, which is to close the 2 tracks every weekend, is fine as long as the tracks are available at 5 o'clock Monday morning. And the ability or inability of the tracks to be available at 5 o'clock Monday morning are no longer the responsibility of the Long Island Railroad. They're now the responsibility of Amtrak, since Amtrak is doing the work. All we're doing is paying for it. So while incentives are great, and you know, Lena and I have had this conversation, penalties are even more important than incentives in this situation, because if the tracks are not available at 5 o'clock on Monday morning, it is not the Amtrak customers that will be inconvenienced. It will be our customers that are totally inconvenienced, and that is of great concern to some of us who do not share the confidence that Amtrak can do this work in a reliable fashion.
Just one quick question. We talk about East Side Access, but what about other projects the railroad plans on the main line? Does that have any relationship to this? I know there's the Queens Boulevard Bridge project and there's some others.
No, we don't anticipate that this would have an impact, but we will be looking closely at, where the work aligns over the next 4 years. On Queens Boulevard Bridge, I am pleased to say that our work at the track level is done, and we will be now doing the highway side of it, the understructure of the bridge. Okay. With that, I am going to just keep moving because we do have the rest of the agenda. I'm going to turn to Ray on the status of operations and comments on Hurricane Irene. I do want to echo Howard's opening remarks, that it really was a hurricane plan that we put into effect that made us very effective in being able to restore service in a timely way.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The operating report starts on page number 135 of the committee book. The on-time performance goal for the Long Island Railroad is 95.1%. Overall on-time performance for August was 90.47%. And note that the figures I'm quoting do not include the periods when we suspended service or when we were in recovery from Hurricane Irene. August total peak was 89.93%, with the AM peak finishing at 91.7 and the PM ending at 87.95. August total off-peak on-time performance was 90.72%, with the weekday off-peak being 91.3% and the weekend ending at 88.8%. During August, 98.8% of the peak trains met our seating standard, 98.1% of the scheduled trips were completed, and 444 trains operated more than 15 minutes late. Our year-to-date on-time performance up to August 31st was 93.46%, and the details are listed on page 136. During August, we had 6 100% rush hours, 5 in the AM and 1 in the PM, and year-to-date we have had 35, 23 in the AM and 12 in the PM. Turning to equipment, the AM peak car availability was met each day in August, and the total fleet MBDF for July, note the 1 month lag in reporting, was 192 miles versus a goal of 150,000 miles. In terms of safety, reportable employee accidents down slightly, 111 versus 113 last year. Customer accidents are down slightly, 267 versus 269. Rail accidents are up 27 versus 15. Now, as Helena had mentioned, the major event affecting our performance during the month, of course, was Hurricane Irene, which struck the region during the weekend of August 27th and 28th. Along with the other MTA agencies, we implemented our hurricane plan. We also did some planning specific to this storm and the elements of this storm, where we suspended service on Saturday, coordinated with the other agencies to make sure that we didn't leave anybody in between. We arranged for some of our employees to be put into hotels so that they'd be available to respond. We had a very timely, once the storm was over, we had a very timely and effective response on the part of our employees, which I think made a great deal of difference. We were able to expedite the inspection of the railroad because we really, one disadvantage of not running, we really did not know what we had in terms of damage. The MTA police were helpful in intervening with the Suffolk County Police to provide a helicopter, which was of use, and going over some of the remote areas of the railroad to see what kind of damage that we had. We were able to start running some service between Jamaica and New York on Sunday evening, and then open on our main branches on Monday morning. Coming out of the storm, we have conducted the lessons learned. We are going to make some changes to our hurricane plan. Most of it has to do with our recovery process, where we would, in addition to our immediate recovery, we would do in-depth examinations of our infrastructure to make sure that we don't have any latent problems that affect us later on. We feel that our protection of our infrastructure and then of our equipment was effective because we did not sustain damage. I'll mention two of the big challenges. One was the fact that we have almost 300 crossing gates, all of which had to be removed and deactivated. And then when they were put back in service, they had to have the gates put back on, and then had to go through a whole series of testing to make sure that the crossings worked effectively. And another interesting side was the fact that we had to take the trains out of West Side Yard because it possibly could have flooded. We removed about 20 trains, had a storm along our main line, and that was pretty much the easy part. The more difficult part, where our employees were very helpful, is that we had to get all those trains moved back in time to be staged for the morning rush hour, inspected, and ready to go the next morning. And one thing, too, that we're looking into is the areas where, due to loss of local power, our electronic signs did not work. We have heard what Bill is saying, and we are working to come up with ways to convey information when that information infrastructure does not work. We also had during the month of August, we had the subway series, August 1st through 3rd. Once again, the MTA police were invaluable help during the hurricane, and also the other two storms that occurred during August, and with the event at Metz Willets Point. That concludes the operating report, and I'm ready for any questions that you may have. Yes, sir.
Let me start by saying both Long Island Railroad and Metro North Management deserve absolutely high marks for the wonderful work they've done under very serious stress. I have two questions, if I may. I don't understand why it is that, looking at page 136, for example, PM peak is subject to greater delays than AM peak. Why is that?
The PM peak, it's something we're working on. We have made an improvement of 1.2% this year compared to last year, which is
disparity. Why is there such a disparity?
The disparity, I think, is when we have the peaks. First of all, in the off-peak, we're dealing with what we call prime to ripple ratio of about 1 to 2. During both peaks, we are dealing with a ratio of 1 to 4. So that's one thing. The PM is a bit of a challenge because we do have West Side Yard that does have about 1/3 of our crews and equipment in it, but the rest has to be staged. It has to be moved, turned into pen, a very delicate operation. The third thing that we're looking into, too, is that we have, I mentioned the ripple for a reason, is that, of course, we have more prime delays during the PM. What we've decided to do is to focus on a particular area between Jamaica and Penn in all respects, in terms of our routing, in terms of our infrastructure, to make sure that we can react.
Going just opposite direction, the same point of beginning and point of end.
Excuse me?
The trains seem to be going in the same kind of directions, except opposite ways. Why should it take longer? Why should there be greater delays when it's going back in the PM than in the AM coming in?
The issue, of course, is that in the morning, everybody's dispersed, and in the PM, it all has to be staged and leave at a certain time. And really, it's not a delay in terms of when things run normal. The real issue is that when something happens, it has a bigger effect.
And I'm just going to jump in for a moment. Again, as Ray just described, with 11 branches of trains coming in the morning, there's a greater opportunity to, maximize on-time performance because, the trains are departing from so many different locations. But evening service is very much concentrated on Penn Station. Only about 1/3 of the beginning evening service can start out of Penn with a train at West Side Yard. So we pull the train out of West Side Yard into Penn Station, load it up and go. The rest of the trains are being recycled and brought in to stage the PM peak. And anytime, there's an opposing train movement, that has to be made very carefully. Any delay, that's the prime delay that may occur in Penn Station, has what Ray said is a ripple effect on that train that's trying to make the opposing move. And I will say, and we're examining, the number of delays that are being caused at Penn Station that do relate to the Amtrak infrastructure.
It is a huge disparity in terms of percentage. Second question I have is, and I'm going to probably have this repeatedly, look at the standees again, coming out of Huntington, coming out of Fort Washington, Ronkonkoma, and again, they're just enormous, excessive standees. It may be the fault of the local governments in the area, it may be the fault of anyone, but I think we need to focus on the fact that the public is being asked to stand in trains through no fault of the MTAs or the Long Island Railroad.
Okay, with that,
I just want regarding standees and how they're calculated, and also about use of equipment on lines that are very congested. Which you don't choose to use M3s more than M7s on a line that's more congested because they have more capacity. You just use what you use, right? Whatever, you don't make that choice isn't made. If the line needs more capacity, because the M7s have significantly less capacity. And is the calculation here done? It isn't done according to that either. The standees is done based on a
M7.
M7.
It's done on
so in other words, if they get an M3 train, they're doing better than what this shows, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because that's we picked the worst case for that purpose.
Okay, worst case is M. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we based on M7, and you don't because M7 is so you're not looking to reduce standees through the use of M3s at all.
Right.
And that's not something you couldn't do it operationally anyway. And I don't know with a lower. Okay. And I just ditto Chuck's concerns regarding on-time performance. That's a big concern. Although you're doing slightly better than last year, I note that. And almost every category, including types of delays. But let me see what else. Excuse me. Yeah, there was one delay, inappropriate action of engineer. It doesn't say rules violation. I just wonder what's the difference.
It's the same thing, really. A rules violation.
All right. Okay. And we didn't do safety yet?
Yes, we did.
Oh, okay. Then the escalator injuries. I'm just wondering, for several months now, they seem to be a little bit high. I just wondered if there's a tracking of that. Is there some place where people are getting injured on escalators? Because that's the one that's gone up.
Nothing stands out, but I'll take a look at that.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
Okay, with that, we're going to turn to our financial and ridership report.
Good morning. The finance report begins on page 159. I'd say that there's three major points to the financial report. One is, as you know, this is the first time we're reporting actuals versus the July plan, so you'll note through most of the figures where the Long Island Railroad is very close to budget and projection. The second point would be that I'd like you to take away is that ridership in July was relatively strong. It was one of our stronger months, still down, but better than the recent months. And August, without the hurricane, would have been relatively strong as well. We estimate we lost 331,000 rides due to the hurricane. And lastly, the third point is that the budget condition is very stable at the Long Island Railroad. And I'd most like to point out that our payroll-related expenses, straight time and overtime, are basically right on budget. So those are the three important themes. Moving to ridership, you received the preliminary joint report from Metro-North and Long Island Railroad for August. Long Island Railroad carried 6.8 million passengers in August. That was 5.7% less than August of 2010. But again, if not for the hurricane, the drop would have been significantly less. It would have been 1.2%, not 5.7%. Commutation was down 4.4%, would have been 2.2% without the hurricane. Non-commutation took a very strong hit, obviously, with the hurricane happening on the weekend. That was down 7.5% compared to 2010. But it actually would have increased. Actually, that's important. In August, the non-commutation ridership for the Long Island Railroad would have increased if not for the hurricane. Quickly, I did want to point out two other initiatives that we introduced recently that relate to ridership. We introduced the new city ticket at Metz Willits during August. There were only 4 dates, it turned out, because one weekend was washed out with the hurricane, so it's a very small sample. But there were about 1,300 tickets sold through City Ticket. And also, you may have read about the onboard handheld pilots that we've introduced on the Greenport branch and the Montauk branch. For ticket sales, we've processed roughly 1,900 tickets on those branches during the pilot program. And onboard commissary sales were 384 transactions. So those pilots continue, and we continue to evaluate the response from customers and employees. Year-to-date ridership is down 2.1% compared to 2010. And obviously, as I mentioned before, it would be down only 1.5% if not for the hurricane. Belmont ridership, we introduced that service earlier this year. Since the introduction of the program, there have been 33,000 tickets sold. For the budget report, on revenue, we've generated $453 million in revenue. This was $11 million unfavorable to budget, but most of that is due to the normal fluctuations in the timing of capital project activity. So overall bottom line, it has very little impact on the financial performance of the railroad. We had collected $328 million in fare revenue, which is actually better than the budget by about $500,000. Expenses, total expenses through July were $993 million. That was $43 billion favorable to budget. As I noted earlier, payroll-related expenses are basically right on out of out of $548 million of expenses, it was within $200,000 of budget, which was very close, obviously. There's roughly 6,300 active employees at the Long Island Railroad and 100 vacancies. However, most of those vacancies are in the reimbursable capital project activity area where we wait for the projects to begin. Overtime spending, which we've spent a lot of time on, is $52 million year to date, which is right on budget. And hours worked are actually 21,000 hours less than they had been at this point last year. That's 0.4% less than last year. There were, as I noted, there is favorable performance in the non-labor area, but most of that is related to timing. I'll wrap up with as noted earlier, there is a series of pages that refer to the cash impacts of the mid-year forecast. In response to Board Member Blair, much of the detail of that was in the July plan information that was circulated through the MTA Finance Committee last month, but I agree with your suggestion. It probably would help to just recap that again on a one-page sort of summary. It would probably be helpful to you. Well, those were the major points that I thought were worthy of mention in the finance area.
Any questions? Sure.
Take August out of the mix because of the hurricane. If you do that, you find in June and July you've had a decrease in ridership in both months. My question is, what efforts are we making to try and ascertain what factors have caused these decreases? Because putting aside the hurricane situation, putting aside the fact that employment concerns continue, every time we have a decrease, the Long Island Expressway becomes a Long Island parking lot. It seems to me that we need to understand why people are leaving.
Right. There would be two categories, obviously, commutation and non-commutation. I would say that the best way we assess commutation, the causes of reductions in commutation ridership, we do monthly surveys of the mail-in ride program, which are our core customers that make up the bulk of the commuters. And when they disenroll or do not enroll any longer, we ask them what were the reasons. So we typically find the vast majority of those reasons that we get from our own customers are they moved away, they lost their job. Those are overwhelmingly the most important factors. On non-commutation, we track the major events that are taking place during the year, whether they be. So this year we saw, as you know, several severe weather events. We had the derailment would have been another example. And there was a February ice storm, a series of items, and in each case, we assess what the lost ridership would have been due to that.
You can't count that in June and July.
No, I'm talking about year to date.
A decrease of utilization because of the summer months. But it seems to me that we have to find a better way to find out why people are doing this. Are we doing something right? Are we doing something wrong?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to jump in and just say, Commissioner, we're going to take that under advisement. I think you are correct that we do need a more sustained way of looking at the regional impacts of the Long Island economy on Long Island Railroad service, because there is no question Long Island is lagging behind in terms of, well, I have to phrase that differently now that we're in nationwide worry about sovereign debt. But up until that point, it seemed as though many areas were coming out of the recession faster than Long Island. Now there's a new worry that we're all going to re-enter a recession. But nonetheless, this is having a dramatic impact on Long Island, and we are seeing it. We're reading about it, and I need to quantify in a better way what the impact is on Long Island Railroad service. Anecdotally, I can say that, we are hearing a number of issues about the cost of service, and we are also hearing on the Port Washington line, the loss of the half-hourly off-peak service has contributed to people saying, now it's easier for me to take my car. So we are looking at that. That's anecdotal evidence. I need to combine that with more hard evidence as to what's going on with our ridership.
And then perhaps factor in how we can deal with each of those issues.
I just want to, ditto those remarks, but also I just want to note that revenue and ridership is above forecast. That hasn't been the case. I want to congratulate the railroad on also holding down costs. I think that's a compliment to management to do it, both railroads, to do it up until through this difficult period of the 10 plagues or whatever we've been experiencing. And anyway, I just want to note, because revenue is above forecast, I think we should start looking at what we should do and in terms of it's marginally above, but there's some issues with ticketing and those changes in policies that may be impacting people to be, and not dollar-wise, but it makes them angry at the railroad and not ride. I know people are very upset about the onboard charges, the short expiration of the tickets, and I think looking at those policies would be good. And one step would be good to know how much revenue are we getting from each of those changes in policies, and is it worth it? So it'd be good to see something. How much money do we get from the short expirations? And how many? That's pretty easy to figure, I would think, because how many tickets are not collected, kind of thing would be.
Can I just say something? Just so for 1 month I don't have 5 minutes to catch up on the bus committee meeting. I think that the big discussion today was regarding the hurricane, and there are some ongoing things that seem to come up every meeting, and they're all the standees, and all these things are very good things to talk about, but I don't think we have to speak about them right now when there are several other MTA workers that are waiting for their meetings to happen. And that's just my thought.
Okay, with that, I am going to keep moving on our agenda. There is a capital program report. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to address them. I've already mentioned the completion of the Queens Boulevard work. Any questions there? Okay, and on the information items, I'm going to note that the Strategic Investments Planning Study is included for Long Island Railroad. I would like to highlight on page 234 is the Penn Gateway project. That's a project that needs more information so that we can share it with this board. As you know, the demise of the ARC project has really resulted in Amtrak re-looking at what it needs to do to address Penn capacity and their own need for future tunnels. And with that, I am going to turn to our action item on page 237. Oops, I'm sorry. It's 241.
41.
And we ask approval of the board to commence a rulemaking procedure with the State Administrative Procedure Act, and this would revise both Metro North and Long Island Railroad's rules to conform to the new legislation passed by the state regarding no smoking on outdoor ticketing and boarding and platform areas. This would allow us to amend our rules of conduct, permit enforcement by MTA police, and make it consistent with changes that were made in the 90s with regard to regulation of indoor smoking, and we ask for your approval.
Can I get a motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Okay, and with that, it's MTA Police report.
Good morning. I know we're running late. We were up in August 35 verse 26, an increase of 9. We're still having an issue, unfortunately, out east. We were up 19 verse 9. The book shows 4 robberies. It was actually 3. 1 was reclassified, and 13 larcenies, verse 6. We had a robbery of a cell phone on the train in Central Islip that was closed by an arrest that was made on the scene. We had a robbery at the Northport Station, which we've enlisted the help of Suffolk County Crime Stoppers. We do have a sketch that we produced, and we put that out. We did get a number of tips through advertisement on News 12 and Channel 2. The robbery had a wind inch that was reclassified to a non-crime, and then we had an attempted of a bag in Penn Station. If you look at the robberies and the larcenies, the 13 larcenies and then the 3 robberies, 6 of those had to do with a cell phone or a laptop. So that. When you look at the overall crime for the year, that's what's been driving our numbers. If anybody has any questions.
Questions, Chief? Okay. Michael.
Okay. I'm going to try to mitigate the time and be brief, right? Notwithstanding the ERT impact on East Side Access, we have continued to make progress in the soft ground tunneling mining in Queens. The first two tunnels, the Yard Lead and Tunnel A, should be completed before the end of the year, and we're actually moving at a pretty sustained pace, better than what we expected, and we hope that that would continue. That's really, we are breaking new grounds there. The ground freezing at the Northern Boulevard crossing has begun, and we expect sometime in November to start excavation. The last of the Amtrak design for Stage 1 approvals have been received, and that will free us to now truly move on Harold and actually combine that with whatever the ERT work will be. I just wanted to give you a couple of slides on the work in Manhattan tunnels and caverns. And this is actually the work in the cavern. I believe this is the Eastern Cavern. We are actually shotcreting and moving along. This is shows you that actually we are actually installing the waterproofing, and we have done about 50% of the concreting of the arches in this particular cavern. These are the tail tracks. This is the lower level tail tracks between 37th and 45th Street. This is that was the east. That's the west. Here we started actually to concrete as well. And this is actually wellway number 4. This is where the escalators are going to come into place. And we started concreting. And actually, this is the opposite end. Wellway number 1, we're still blasting. So anyone that has taken a tour can see it progressing. At each wellway, it's a different stage. This is a view from the portal of the Yardley Tunnel. The big difference here is that we are installing precasting as we move along, so whatever you see will be finished. So that's right now. Today we are actually moving again. We stopped at a certain location when we froze the ground to service the machine. This is all done under pressurized environment. So we're now today going to move on. So that's going to be quite an interesting thing, because normally we don't stop machines in a frozen zone. In this case, what we did is we retrofitted the machine. We made all kind of holes in it, provided nipples, and we put a special grease that does not freeze. I think it's minus 70 Fahrenheit for that to freeze. So now we have to just start moving again. So we expect that we'll be able to do it today. That's it.
Okay, we're into procurements. We have 2 non-competitive procurements for Metro North and 2 for Long Island, listed on page 255. Can I get a motion, and then we'll have some discussion? Get a motion?
I'd like to address 2.
Second?
I'd like to address the Mitsui one, please.
Okay.
Howard, was there a notice published prior to this meeting, formal notice about this non-competitive bid?
I'm sorry.
The reason I ask you is, on its face, this proposal violates the provisions of 1265A of New York State Public Authorities Law. There's no reason under the Public Authorities Law why this is scheduled as a non-competitive bid. And there's no exemption for it unless there's compliance with the notice requirements.
Well, this is, Chuck, I'm going to have Anthony answer in a minute, but this is an OEM contract. So, but I'll ask Anthony what the...
Did you publish it within the provisions of 1269? Please state so in these reports.
Okay, we'll clarify that in the future.
My problem is so many of these, on the face of these reports, do not comport with the requirements of the Public Authorities Law.
Yeah, Chuck, we actually, the second paragraph, we'll make it higher, but it says at the bottom there, it talks about the advertisement. But we'll bring that forward.
That's not the kind of advertisement that's required. Please, just somebody take a look at these.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, on page 256, we have 11 competitive procurements. We have 4 for Metro North. We have 3 for Long Island Railroad and 1 for capital construction, or 4 for capital construction. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion?
Sorry, 3 for capital construction or
4.
4? This is what was handed out. The 4th is the one that was handed out. Can I just make one comment on that?
Sure.
The one that was handed out. I just want to note that the amount of the contract as adjusted is about 220% of where it started, and that the promotional modification today is nearly 10% of the original amount. And I think that goes back to what gets attention. I'm going to vote for it anyway, but I think that, especially given the fact that it was handed out at the meeting, that there ought to be focused on that. Because I think that, given issues related to capital plans generally, I think that not focusing on it in particular probably doesn't serve any of us well. I want to make that point.
Chuck.
In the same vein, if you take a look at the Ducci contract, that was originally apparently competitively bid. Why wasn't this one? But it's still a new contract for these purposes. You're spending hundreds of thousands. And you're changing it without any kind of competitive bidding?
Yeah. So, yeah, I will explain after outside. I can explain to you the background on the Ducci contract. There are field issues there that I will explain.
Jim, just one comment. I just want to note that TWU is doing what I think is an important public service tomorrow, which is holding a conference at the Brooklyn Navy Yard on the important subject of transit manufacturing in the city and state. It's free of charge, open to everybody, and I just wanted to note that because I think that's an important public service. It's an important topic, I think, for all of us. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And we have 1 ratification from Metro North. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Our next meeting is Monday, October 24th at 8:30 a.m. I get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any opposed?
All right. See you later. Michael, see you later. Good luck, guys. Good afternoon.